Star Trek. Voyager narrowly avoided repeating TNG's disappointing Troi mistake. Star Trek. Voyager narrowly avoided repeating the disappointing mistake that Star Trek: The Next Generation made with Counselor Deanna Troi, Marina Sirtis. Star Trek: The Next Generation made a bold statement supporting mental health by giving Deanna Troi an important spot on the bridge of the USS Enterprise D next to Captain Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart. With half-betazoid empathic abilities and skill as a Starfleet therapist, Counselor Troi was poised to be an insightful, compassionate professional. Yet Troi's form-fitting civilian attire set Deanna apart from the rest of the Enterprise senior staff as a sexualized character, saddled with weak storylines. Disappointingly, Counselor Deanna Troi's characterization on Star Trek: The Next Generation seemed to be summed up as sexy lady, instead of Troi being treated as a whole person. With few exceptions, like TNG Season 4's The Loss, episodes that were ostensibly about Troi tended to focus on the roles Deanna played in other people's lives as a love interest for guest stars, as Waxana Troi's Majel Barrett Roddenberry daughter, or as someone who could be used for her empathic powers. As long as Deanna Troi wore form-fitting civilian clothing while on duty, Troi lacked agency in her own stories. Star Trek sexualized both Troi and Seven of Nine, but Seven was given more characterization when Star Trek Voyager needed a ratings boost and brought on Jeri Ryan as sexy ex-Borg 7 of 9 for Voyager's 4th season. It seemed that Star Trek's Counselor Troi mistake would be repeated, but Star Trek Voyager avoided making TNG's mistake of Troi's sexual appeal standing in for characterization by making 7 of 9 a more well-rounded character. Seven had a compelling built-in character arc that saw Seven evolve from being a Borg drone to discovering her humanity. Speaking to HuffPost TV in a 2012 interview, Jeri Ryan explained how she felt about 7 of 9 being depicted as sexy. Like Deanna Troi on Star Trek: The Next Generation, 7 of 9 was absolutely a sexualized character and could have fallen victim to being little more than ratings-boosting eye candy in 7 of 9's famous catsuits. Instead, being sexy didn't replace Seven's intelligence. A 7 of 9's strong character arc over Jeri Ryan's 4 seasons in Star Trek Voyager blended Seven's sexual appeal with a compelling story that was necessary for Seven to even be on the USS Voyager in the first place. As Voyager's resident Borg, one might even say that 7 of 9 had the best of both worlds. Star Trek fixed its Troi mistake. Eventually, Star Trek: The Next Generation did eventually fix the mistake that had been made with Deanna Troi. In TNG Season 6, Episode 10, Chain of Command Part 1, when Captain Edward Jellicoe Ronnie Cox assumes temporary command of the USS Enterprise, Jellicoe requests that Troi start wearing a Starfleet uniform while on duty. After trading in her skin-tight bunny suit for a proper uniform, Deanna Troi was taken more seriously as a character, with storylines befitting a competent mental health professional and Starfleet officer, like skillfully handling Romulan espionage in TNG Season 6, Episode 14, Face of the Enemy. Star Trek Voyager was a groundbreaking entry in the Star Trek franchise, bringing new adventures, species, and a refreshing spin on the formula by stranding a Starfleet crew in the uncharted Delta Quadrant. Among its cast, Captain Kathryn Janeway, played by Kate Mulgrew, stood as the first female lead captain in a Star Trek series. This decision marked a significant step forward for representation in science fiction. However, as the series developed, one potential pitfall loomed on the horizon, repeating the mistakes of Star Trek: The Next Generation (TNG) with its portrayal of Counselor Deanna Troi. Troi, portrayed by Marina Sirtis, was an essential figure in TNG. She was half-betazoid, an empath who could sense the emotions of others. Despite the potential of her character to bring depth to the narrative, Troi was frequently underutilized and often relegated to roles that undermined her importance. Early seasons of TNG made Troi more of a sidekick than a full-fledged officer, reducing her to a stereotypically emotional or romantic figure. This dynamic was worsened by the show's tendency to focus on her appearance, with Troi regularly wearing a non-standard form-fitting uniform in contrast to her fellow officers. Star Trek Voyager introduced its own strong female characters, such as Janeway and the half-Klingon, half-human engineer B'Elanna Torres. However, it also introduced a character that could have fallen into the same trap as Troi, Kes. Played by Jennifer Lyon, Kes was an Ocampan, a short-lived alien species who possessed telepathic and healing abilities. While Kes had the potential to fill a unique and powerful niche within the crew, there was a genuine risk that she could have been written as a derivative, underdeveloped female character in the same way Troi had been in TNG. The parallels between Troi and Kes were evident. Both characters had extraordinary abilities that could have been integral to their respective series, yet both were at risk of being relegated to emotional or passive roles rather than actively shaping the stories around them. This issue is particularly glaring because Star Trek as a franchise has often prided itself on progressive and nuanced portrayals of diverse characters. However, Voyager made several key decisions that allowed it to avoid TNG's mistakes with Troi. The show learned from the shortcomings of TNG, and as a result, Kes was given a more substantial and well-rounded arc, especially in the earlier seasons. While Troi's character was often trapped in the role of the ship's counselor, offering emotional support to other crew members without being fully integrated into command decisions or the central narrative, Kes was more involved in the crew's overall dynamic. Her intellectual curiosity and desire to explore her own telepathic abilities were consistently depicted as assets to the crew, not just side plots. Voyager also demonstrated a willingness to evolve its characters in a way TNG had struggled to do in the early seasons with Troi. For example, Kes's relationship with the Doctor, the ship's holographic medical officer, provided a fresh dynamic in which she acted as both a student and mentor to him, contributing to the ship's medical care and encouraging the Doctor's own development as a sentient being. The writers didn't shy away from giving Kes emotional depth, but they allowed her to grow and explore more complex internal conflicts, such as her struggles with her limited lifespan and her burgeoning powers. By contrast, Troi was often pigeonholed into a romantic subplot, most notably with Commander Riker, and wasn't given significant agency until later in TNG's run, when she finally donned a proper Starfleet uniform and took on more serious command responsibilities. Voyager's early handling of Kes avoided making her the token empathetic female character, allowing her to be a more integral part of the crew. Even when romance was introduced into Kes's storylines, such as her relationship with Neelix, it wasn't the defining aspect of her character. That said, Kes's journey wasn't without its flaws. By the time Jennifer Lyon's character left the series in the 4th season, the writers struggled with how to further develop her, and many fans believed she had been replaced by 7 of 9 for the sake of ratings. Still, Kes's portrayal remained a marked improvement over Troi's early trajectory in TNG, as her character had been allowed more autonomy and depth from the start. Voyager also avoided relegating other female characters to emotionally driven roles, as TNG had often done with Troi and Dr. Beverly Crusher. Captain Janeway was written as a strong, complex leader who could exhibit vulnerability without being defined by it. B'Elanna Torres, despite her internal struggles with her Klingon heritage, was never reduced to a one-dimensional portrayal of anger or emotion, maintaining her status as a vital, authoritative presence on the ship. The fact that Voyager largely avoided repeating TNG's mistakes with Troi speaks to the growing awareness of gender dynamics in television at the time. While not perfect, the show gave its female characters richer, more varied stories that allowed them to be full participants in the crew's adventures, rather than mere emotional supports or romantic interests.